Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another video for Godfall, and today is an incredibly special one because I'm joined by Richard Heyne, who's the technical producer at Counterplay Games. How's it going, man?
Oh, it's going great. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
Honestly, thank you for joining me. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. From the moment I saw this, from the very first trailer, I have been so excited for this. So just when the opportunity came through to sit down and chat, I was like, clear my schedule. Let's just go. This needs to happen. So yeah, it's gonna be good.
Hell yeah, we love watching your videos at the studio. I do have to say though, I'm slightly intimidated. I'm usually the beard guy in my circles, so sitting here looking at it, I just feel so inadequate. But hopefully, I'm.
Oh, but you've got all the hair. See, I feel like I'm compensating for the fact that I've got no hair, right?
I've got too much hair. I've got quarantine hair. There's so much of it going on in the back. That's why I gotta.
No, but that's awesome. And you can pull off the headband. Look, if I wore a headband, it would look kind of weird. It'd just be like a crystal ball at the top of it. So
it'd kind of be like a crown of the sorts. Yeah.
Exactly right. Definitely. But yeah, for those of you guys watching at home, obviously we're gonna chat about the game today. We're gonna, I've got a load of questions, things that I want to ask, and things that I know that you guys definitely gonna want to know about. But also, extra exciting, today we've got an exclusive look at one of the next Valorplates. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but you won't have seen this anywhere else, so if you want to see what one of the new Valorplates looks like, then definitely stick around. So, but yeah, let's kind of start at the top. Before we dive into some of the hyper-specific stuff that I want to talk about, top level, let's talk about kind of the game model, because obviously the description for the game says, it sees us ascending a tower to defeat Macross, right? And then, that to me sounds like quite a finite encounter. So is this game designed to be like a game as a service that we can continually play and revisit, or is it designed to be more like an experience that we can quote-unquote complete?
So there is an experience you can complete. There's a campaign, just like you highlighted. Keith Lee, our creative director, had a great interview with GameSpot recently where he really dug into some of those details. You're ascending the Skybreaker monolith to defeat Macross, to defeat the Mad God, right? And as you do so, you're venturing through the different elemental realms, earth, water, etc. And that is a finite experience as you're going up the Skybreaker monolith. That being said, there is replayable content, there is endgame content, and there is more for the player to explore and revisit once they have completed their ascent of the Skybreaker monolith. We don't consider it a game as service. There are no microtransactions in Godfall, but nice. We are planning that there is plenty of content for the player to dig into once Macross is defeated, so to speak.
Okay. So, I appreciate that there's only so much you can kind of touch on, but is there any kind of clarity we can get on maybe what the end game might look like? Once we've kind of defeated Macross, what is going to kind of keep us coming back to sort of play, or can we get any vision on that?
Yeah, so on your journey to defeat Macross, these environments that we're talking about, these elemental realms, they're massive, right? And as you're going through the campaign, in some ways you're really only scratching the surface. You don't worry, the campaign's going to show you plenty of the world of Godfall, the world of Empyrean, but there's going to be more that you don't experience. And one of our core pillars when designing these environments is we wanted to create a space that players want to spend time in. Right. They want to go back to. It almost feels like home in some ways. So yeah, once you've completed the campaign, you will have the ability to go back to these realms and explore them in new ways, to experience new encounters, new challenges. Of course, can't dig into it too much here, but the idea is that there will be plenty of content for the player to continue to chew on well past the credit scene.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that sounds cool. The world from what I've seen already looks really cool. So definitely can't wait to sort of explore. Within that, I guess there'll kind of be different sort of biomes and stuff that maybe we can, basically I just want snow. I just want to see snow.
Sure. Makes sense.
But let's talk a bit about loot, because obviously in this game it's quite interesting from what we've sort of learned thus far, because when we look at the loot structure, are we looking at, say, obtaining loot from, say, random drops, or specific things for completing various, say, quests or defeating enemies? Because Valorplate's obviously one of the underlining things that we'll speak more about later. If you don't, the game description says that you unlock those, so you wouldn't loot Valorplates. So with that being said, what is the loot structure? What are we chasing?
Correct. So you're absolutely right. You don't loot Valorplates, you do unlock them, and we'll dig into that a little bit more later on here. But as far as loot, first and foremost, it's a mix, right? There's a mix of random loot that's dropped by enemies, and then loot rewards for completing, key campaign beats, story missions, hunt missions, side missions, etc. And we wanted to have a mix because we didn't want to downplay those story beats. I think something that can be disheartening as a player is when you defeat this big epic boss and the loot or the reward that you get, it feels less powerful than a random drop you might have got from an enemy, right? But at the same time, we want that thrill that when you defeat a random enemy and an epic or a legendary drops, to some degree, you have no idea what that loot could be. There's a thrill and there's a dopamine burst that occurs when you're like, what is this that I just got? So we didn't want it to be where you defeat this enemy, you can only get one drop. We wanted there to be some randomness. So we tried to create a healthy mix where at every moment, and there's so many different loot vectors that we can explore. It isn't just weapons, right? It's also the resources that allow you to upgrade your weapons or that allow you to unlock Valorplates. So because we have different reward vectors, every step of the way we're allowed to give players what feels fair in the moment, and I think that just makes the content incredibly fun and fluid as you consume it.
Okay, yeah. No, that definitely sounds cool. And I like the idea of being able to kind of upgrade stuff as well. I guess that kind of means that we can then bring things with us if we find something we like, right? So kind of adds more importance to certain key loot items. Yeah,
I mean, that was one of the core pillars with our I guess, philosophy on designing loot, is we really wanted to focus on quality over quantity. Just because we're big fans of looters. I mean, we've talked about it in past interviews. We love Destiny, we love Diablo 3. We have a lot of folks from Blizzard, Path of Exile. All of that stuff. We love it. Borderlands, of course, can't go without mentioning Borderlands. But we just wanted to approach loot differently. We wanted every single piece of loot in some way to feel meaningful to the player. In the sense that if you find, let's say, a polearm in the early game, you love that polearm because it works really well for your build or really well for your play style, and you don't want to give up that polearm. You have the ability to carry it through with you through the entire game, as long as you're upgrading it, kind of keeping it up to the power level of whatever loot is around you at the time. You have the ability to literally just use that one weapon if you want it. But then, of course, there will be a wide variety to select from. So I think that'll be more of the edge case. Players will want to experiment.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I think it's nice to have the option though, right? I think it's definitely one of those sort of things, because sometimes you do find that item. Yeah, that's cool. So I mean, obviously outside of that, what kind of talking a bit more about the level of customization, because obviously we know that we have Valorplates and we have weapons and stuff, but are we what else are we looking for in our kind of our gear game? Before we actually get onto Valorplates, what else are we gonna have for our build?
Yeah, absolutely. So because the Valorplate is a single piece of armor, I think that was one of the things that perhaps surprised people the most or felt unique, right? Because a lot of times when you play looters, you think of your equipment as, you have your headgear, your chest, your legs, etc. And so when people hear, wait, my Valorplate is all one single piece, that took people off guard. And one of the questions we got early on is, can you mix and match Valorplates? So an important piece of clarity here is you cannot. There are 12 Valorplates in the game, and when you select them, that is the Valorplate you're playing as. You're not going to be able to take the helmet from one and the chest plate from the other. Nothing like that. They were never designed to be that way, because we wanted these Valorplates to have very clear identity and for the player to latch onto that. Now, as far as customization goes, we were comfortable going this direction with our Valorplates because there are many other loot vectors. So it's not like you're being robbed of the experience of putting different pieces of loot into your character, but rather being the traditional headgear, chest plate. It's more like trinkets, rings, amulets, accessories, those types of elements that boost your character, that add unique traits to them and really influence your play style. So there's still plenty of equipment, there's still plenty of loot, and your loadout is going to be quite substantial to the way that you play and impact your power level. And then beyond that, we do want players to be able to express themselves. So we understand, 12 Valorplates, they're going to have very unique looks to them, but we wanted to go a step further. So we offer a wide variety of recolors as well, and they're a way for players to really express their personality. Because again, what I'm most excited about, or one of the things I'm most excited about, is just seeing, because co-op is such a core piece for Godfall, seeing what people's parties are going to look like when they select their 3 Valorplates, their recolors, and their weapons. They just look so badass, to be honest with you. I'm really excited to see what folks come up with and the different loadouts and team comps they come up with. Yeah,
that's gonna be really cool to see, definitely. So I guess kind of talking about team comps and stuff, can we go a little bit deeper into, say, weapons? Because there are, I believe it's 5 weapons, right? 5 weapon kind of classes. So when we look at kind of the sort of gameplay structure for it, are the moves tied more so to the weapons or to, say, the Valorplates?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring that up, because I remember you hypothesizing that in one of your earlier videos. Does your Valorplate influence your moveset, etc.? It's really fun watching someone like you analyze our combat, because you're asking a lot of the questions that we as designers have to ask ourselves as we build this thing, right? And that was one of the core questions. I mean, we've been working on this combat system for well over 3 years now. That was one of the first questions we had to ask ourselves: is the moveset tied to the weapons or to Valorplates, or some kind of mixture of the two? So to take a step back, like you said, there are 5 weapon classes. You have longsword, polearm, greatsword, dual blades, and the warhammer. Your moveset is entirely tied to the weapon class. Your Valorplate does not influence your moveset at all, right? So if I'm using the longsword on Valorplate A, and then I switch to Valorplate C, my moves are going to be the same. And the reason that we ultimately went that route is we admittedly did experiment. We looked at what does it look like if Valorplates, give you unique moves, influence combos in such a way. But there's such an emphasis on offense first and perfecting your combos in Godfall. We found that was just too much variance. The ability to master your weapon became difficult if every single time you changed your Valorplate, it in some way, even in a minor sense, changed. And we didn't want to discourage players from switching Valorplates because we want them to experiment with new builds, but we didn't want them to feel as though that infringed upon their ability to master their weapon. So movesets are entirely tied to the weapon as a result.
Okay, yeah. No, I think that makes sense, because then it means you can like lean into weapon mastery, and then you are then able to kind of switch as you see fit, which is nice, cool, definitely.
Yeah.
So following on from there, like obviously co-op is going to be one of the big parts of the game. Like, how is the experience going to differ from solo to co-op?
Yeah, so there's just something, if I can have a proud dev dad moment, there's just something magical about co-op in Godfall, because as Keith mentioned, our creative director, in that past GameSpot interview, we're really kind of a mix. I love when we try to have a comparison of like, what would this game be a baby of? It would be a baby of this game and this game, right? And then the comparison that Keith gave in that interview was we're really like a 2019 God of War with a little bit of Devil May Cry 5 as well. And what's so magical about co-op is those are 2 single-player games, and we love, at any given moment at Counterplay Games, someone is playing through God of War, even to this day. Like, we've been playing God of War all throughout. We're big fans of all of these titles. And what's so magical about co-op in Godfall is you're experiencing a type of combat that you've never really gotten to experience with your friends before, at least not in this way, because it's so offense focused. But maybe the closest experience would be something like Monster Hunter World, but even that is just a complete departure for what Godfall ultimately lands on. That isn't to downplay solo. Solo is incredibly fun simply because one of our core design pillars was this idea of one against many. When you don a Valorplate, you should feel like you have this godlike power to take on the world. And solo really does a great job of capturing that these encounters, you'll be facing 4 to 5 enemies at a single time, and you have to think about how you're going to maneuver the battlefield and manipulate that. But then once you just start to add your friends into the equation, it's just a blast, and it becomes, and then you start to mix the loot in there, and you start bragging to your friends about who got what drops, and it's really something else.
Yeah, these games, like 100%. I'm like, I'm all about playing these with friends. Like that experience just goes to the next level. So cannot wait to see that, definitely. So I guess let's talk a little bit about Valorplates. Like, before we speak about the new one, like just top level, like how do these like function? So obviously we know now that you can't separate them or mix and match them or whatnot, but the site says that they're unlocked. So how does this, like, if we look at it from like a progression model, how are we going to encounter new Valorplates?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, you unlock your Valorplates in the Sanctum, which is the player's hub, right? Their home base. And the way in which you unlock Valorplates is similar to how you would upgrade your weapon, which is you gather specific resources through mission rewards, etc. And then you have agency as the player over which Valorplate you want to unlock. They'll have various requirements, so of course you'll need to make sure that you have everything to satisfy that. But the game largely doesn't tell you which Valorplate you have to unlock when or play when. There's really a lot of freedom between those 12 Valorplates to decide on what you're going to unlock first versus last, and then what you're going to play when, etc.
Okay, that's really cool. So, like, is that the same for like all of them, or is there like any chance of there being like some of them where it's like, you can only like unlock Valorplate number 12 once you've got a certain way through the game?
Yeah, not so much of that. There are a couple of story beats that I suppose are tied to Valorplates in some way, but largely it'll be up to the player when they choose to craft and obtain those Valorplates.
Fair. And then, so obviously within the Valorplates, we know that, so we have our underlying like melee combat system. Then we have the Valorplates offer us like abilities and specials on top, and then we have like Archon mode. So like, just sort of loosely speaking, like how does like the special and the abilities work?
Yeah, so there are a lot of layers to peel back with the Valorplates and the way that they're going to influence a player's build, play style, etc. And we're really just starting to peel back the layers here. When diving into Archon mode, I suppose I want to emphasize that really is kind of just the first layer. And we're really excited to roll out more and more of the mystery around Valorplates and how they influence the way the player is going to experience Godfall. But as far as Archon modes go, it's as simple as that, they're similar to ultimate abilities, super abilities, a mechanic that players should be pretty familiar with at this point. And the idea is that you're filling up a bar as you experience combat. And then once that bar is full, you have the ability to activate your Archon mode. Taking a step back, all Valorplates have a passive buff that they give you, a trait that's assigned to them. And when you activate your Archon mode, two things happen. The first is that passive buff is increased substantially, right? So just to give you a loose example, if your Valorplate gave you plus 10% damage, when you activate Archon mode, it would bump up to perhaps plus 40%, something along those lines. Very simple example. But then you also get an activation ability. So when you activate your Archon mode, something happens. And this can be a wide variety of things. We're going to dig in a little bit more to the specifics of that in a moment here. But the idea is whenever you activate Archon mode, there is something supernatural that takes place in that moment.
Okay, that's like from what we've seen in the trailers, like when they glow gold, right? I assume.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, very cool. Okay, so I guess since we're on the topic of Valorplates, like we've got to talk about this because like, so I've seen a little clip of this and like. The Hinterclaw is the new Valorplate, right? Which looks incredibly cool. Like it's kind of, to me, it's kind of almost got that Norse mythology vibe to it. I don't know, I had that very sort of like that. But I don't know, like can you tell us about this? Because this is the first time anyone seeing this one.
From where does discipline spring? The steel resolve to endure? That hunger for perfection. Power taken is power deserved. Ascend to worthiness with Hinterclaw.
Yeah, so Hinterclaw, first of all, is one of my personal favorites. It has been since the early concept stages. So just to see it come as far as it has and to be able to do the reveal here today with you is such an exciting moment because this is something that's years in the making in many ways. So that's awesome. And yeah, Hinterclaw is all about, I mean, we always say that Godfall's combat is really offense first, defense second, kind of. And Hinterclaw just embodies that to the nth degree. The idea behind, the theme behind Hinterclaw is crit strike or crit chance, right? A concept that all of us gamers are familiar with. And Godfall definitely does not try to reinvent the wheel with what a critical strike is, right? When you think critical strike, that is largely what it's going to be in Godfall. Now, that being said, the way that we leverage critical strikes and the way that interacts with your loot, there definitely are some unique tidbits in there that we'll dive into at a later date. But the idea here is that Hinterclaw specializes in dealing critical strikes. So to go back and kind of that overview of what Archon mode is and the abilities that Valorplates have, we can kind of break that down with Hinterclaw, right? So Hinterclaw's passive ability is just simply increasing crit chance by 10%. Very straightforward. Gives you a flat amount. But when you fill up your Archon bar and you activate it, the activation ability is that you actually summon 3 allies to fight alongside you. Ooh, oh yeah. I love seeing your face light up. That's so good. Yes. You summon 3 allies to fight alongside you, which is great. I'll dive into that in a second. And then the active ability that boosts your passive is your crit chance increases to 30%. And then your crit damage is increased 20% for every enemy you kill during Archon mode, up to 200% boost, right? So it's one of those things that you just start like charging forward as soon as you activate this thing, and you're trying to accumulate as much power in the time that your Archon mode is active as you can. And yeah, going back to, I love that your face lit up when we talked about summons, because that's part, for me, what makes this Valorplate so exciting, because we go back to this idea of solo versus co-op play, and this active is so unique in the sense that in solo play it's great, right? Because it's almost like a release valve in the sense that if you feel a lot of pressure on you, there are too many enemies, you're overwhelmed in the moment, you activate your Archon mode, you got 3 goons who are essentially just going to help you deal with whatever situation you're in, which is great in itself, just to be kind of meat shields in a sense. But then what gets really exciting is you take this thing into co-op and you've already got 2 buddies, and now you get 3 more. And then I'm not going to go into too many details about other Valorplates or anything like that, but if you think about it, your 2 buddies are going to have Valorplates too. They're going to have Archon modes. Now what happens when synergies start to happen with the activations of these modes. That's when you're going back to the magic that I alluded to before. That's when it's like Godfall is just in a class of its own and unlike anything that I personally as a gamer have ever experienced.
That sounds cool. I mean, to me, like straight away in my head, I'm like, what if we get 3 Hinterclaws and we all activate our Archon ability? Then it's gonna be wild.
I'm so glad that that's the first place that you're heading.
Yeah.
And I will say we don't want players to feel forced in a situation like that either, where they would need to spam Hinterclaw to get the cool, mini army behind you. So I will say, to accomplish what you're going for, this idea of many summons across many Valorplates, I guess just as a little extra cherry on top here, I will say you wouldn't have to spam Hinterclaw to accomplish that. I won't say anything more.
Okay.
But you wouldn't have to necessarily spam Hinterclaw.
I'll get the
build your
spin 4 hat on. And I'll start theory crafting. Okay, that sounds very cool. That is they're very, very exciting. Definitely from the ones that I've seen. So, I mean, they all look really cool, but from the ones that I've seen so far, like when I saw that, I was like, yes, this is it's very cool.
Awesome.
Very cool. Yeah. So I guess kind of a couple more questions just sort of like round it out. So the loot-based games can often kind of vary sort of deeply when it comes to like allowing players to find like that perfect build. So and obviously in something like Godfall, we know that it's definitely more so like a quality over say quantity kind of thing, but what might we be looking at when it comes to sort of like an ideal build for like a player? What would what's a picture of like an ideal build?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was an interesting kind of debate that we had to go through as a dev team, because we had this core design pillar of offense first, right? I mentioned that earlier on here. And a challenge that we found is we wanted to support archetypes that players are familiar with. There are some of these basic expectations that player has. Players want to play as supports. Players want to play as tanks. That is just a play style that resonates with players. I mean, I'm a support main myself. I get it, right? And we didn't want players to feel discouraged from going that route, even though this is an offense first game. So the challenge that we had to find is we had to support these archetypes, whether it be tanky supports or whatever the case might be, but allow for that in a world where even your monk's going to have to be aggressive, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. I mean? So as far as what's a final build going to look like? A final build is going to look something like you're going to determine that there are a handful of systems in Godfall that you're really, really good at. Whether that be you're a very accurate player, you're very good at kind of managing and juggling multiple enemies at once, you're more of a CC based player. You're going to kind of like focus on some of these high level ideas. And then as you learn the systems in Godfall and how loot traits tie into those systems, you're going to pick the pieces of loot that best boost those overarching archetypes, right? And this idea that we had early on is we want it to be the tinkerer's dream. We wanted this idea that you could just like swap in, the difference between an amulet would completely change the way that your build is experienced and played. And we wanted it to be that substantial. And that's what we're really getting at with the quality of loot is something as simple. In another game, you might write off an amulet, and that's just kind of what rounds out your build. It's like, oh, I need a little bit more resistances. Oh, I got the amulet. Perfect. I'm good to go. But in Godfall, you get that amulet, and it could just, I don't want to overplay it, but it could drastically change in some ways the way that you play and the way that you experience your build. And it just goes back to this idea of being the tinkerer's dream.
Okay, yeah, that sounds cool. It's nice to sort of like hear you can fulfill different like archetypes as well, which is nice. So I guess the very sort of last thing kind of sort of like circles back a little bit to combat earlier, but like the one thing, so we now know that weapons obviously have their own unique moves. We know we get some like stuff from the Valorplates, but when it comes to actual physical combat, because I haven't had a chance to go hands on yet. Like, how would you describe, say, the general flow? Like, if we think about kind of a couple of different sort of combat things, we think about something that's like slightly more weighty and methodical, where say you got your Souls games where you got your heavy and your light attacks, or and you've made those kind of comparisons before to say God of War meets like DMC. So are we looking more for say like just how would it control, if for someone that hasn't actually played, like how would you go into a fight?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you're trying to get a visual in your head, if you're trying to wrap your mind around it, again, that comparison of God of War and DMC gets you a lot of the way there with kind of just imagining what that moment-to-moment combat is going to look like. But it is worth noting that our influences are very clear. I mean, despite the fact that our combat isn't very Souls-like, we don't focus on a lot of one-on-one encounters necessarily. we're still huge fans of that game, those games, and they have influence over the direction that we took Godfall. Our combat is in some ways weighty, but the idea is because there are so many enemies against you, even if these attacks are weighty, it's still pretty chaotic. It's still coming at you fast, despite the fact that the weight is being sold on every enemy's hit, and that you're learning the timing of these various enemies. You really have to be aware of your battlefield at all time, the battlefield and kind of your surroundings. What enemies are right in front of you, what enemies are behind you, flanking you. You kind of have to be aware of this all at once, and we've built systems that allow you to get notifications from varying angles and kind of always know what's going on around you, so you can properly plan your next move. Do I need to go in so I can take down the support in the backline, or do I need to step back because I'm getting flanked by someone? These are the kind of questions we expect players to ask themselves, or call outs that players will be making in co-op to best maneuver the battlefield.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, sounds awesome. I can't wait. When can I play?
Hopefully soon, man.
That's what we're waiting for. But yeah, honestly, that's it for the time being. But thank you so much for taking the time to sit down, chat with me. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate giving us peeling back a lot of information. Hopefully, you guys that are watching enjoy all this as well. Let us know in the comments what you're thinking. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget, if you haven't already done so, you can join the Arekkz Gaming Discord. We've got an awesome community over there with so many different channels for you to chat loads of different topics and different games. I'm in there, the team's in there. If you guys want to chat with us, find people to play with, it's just in general a great place to be. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of our future uploads.